how can we maybe pull some passion out of and impart into the work that we do? What about you? When was the last time you found yourself in a flow? Have you been in a flow before? And if not, why not? So I want you to maybe reframe how you're looking at your current work. What are those core motivations behind it? Are they truly core motivations? Is there that autonomy? Is there that mastery? Is there that sense of purpose or calling or pride? Welcome home, family. You are in the Inspired House. I'm Desmond Davis, and it is so good to be with you again. I thank you. You've been tuning in week after week. Hopefully, you've been getting some of these gems. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the guests and the people who we've brought in to interview. We're kind of on a little bit of an interview hiatus, if I can be honest with you. You're going to see more interviews as we go, but I really wanted to take this month to just focus on me and you. Building some familiarity between me and you so that I can get more comfortable with you, you can get more comfortable with me, what we talk about, some of the things I'm going to present. So we have that bond, we have that connection, we have that relationship, family, that I think is just so important. So I hope that's okay. I hope your family's good. I hope auntie, cousins, pops, grandpa, grandma, all of them are doing good. They're healthy and they're blessed. And for today's conversation, I really want to talk about career, if that's okay. As you know, that's one of our 8 core life categories that we based our ebook on, our coaching, and a lot of the work that we do. And that's the focus on career. And so I want to give us a quick definition really quick. So when we're looking at career, I want to make sure I get this right. So I pulled this up in my notes from my coaching. Your career isn't just a job, right? It's not just a source of income, but it's this lifelong journey of pursuing mastery within a particular skill and teaming that up with a conducive environment that brings out the best in you. Okay, listen carefully. It's about identifying and pursuing pathways that align with your personal values, your skills, and your passions, hopefully leading to that sense of fulfillment and growth, both professionally and personally. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we're looking at career. All right. And so for today's discussion, Hey family, it's Des. I had to pause the conversation for a second because I needed to ask you a quick question. How confident are you that you will eventually reach your goals? Now, don't lie to me. I'm asking on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being Desmond, I have a plan and strategy and I'm constantly working towards that, so I know I'll hit it eventually. And 0 being Desmond, I don't even know where to begin. Matter of fact, let's take this a step further. If somebody was willing to invest $1 million into whatever your dream, whatever your goal is, but it was predicated on the fact that you had some type of plan, some type of vision, some type of strategy, would you get that money right now? Don't lie to me. You might be saying, Desmond, I know I wouldn't get that money because I don't even have a plan. I don't even know where to begin. And if that's you, I think I might have something special for you. I will be doing a free webinar. I'm going to teach people how they can create a brand, create vision and strategy for their life, for their profession, for the goals that they want to hit, and they're going to build it around their values. It's totally free. It'll be a great tool to help you propel into whatever you want to do next. And all you got to do is click the link that should be showing up somewhere on the screen. Or if you're listening via podcast, just click the link in the description. I'll see you there. I thought it would be just really good to really kind of get into looking at how we can go about if we're in a career, if you're in school, right? At that point in time, school is your career. And how can you go through the process of reigniting a sense of passion? You know, as I say, always let you know, I'm a Christian. And one scripture that always comes to mind is to do all things unto the glory of God. But how do you do that? What are some things that we can do? What are some ways that we can be strategic as people to find passion in the work that we're doing, regardless of how mundane it is, regardless of if it's people oriented or not, whatever the reason may be. How can we maybe pull some passion out of and impart into the work that we do? And that'll be our discussion for today. I think I have some helpful tips that I think will be really good for you, whether you find yourself in school, whether you're working a 9 to 5, whether you're at whether even if you're at working fast food. It doesn't matter. I think there are some ways we can pull some passion into the things that we do as we continue to progress forward and move on to bigger, even better things. So I think there's an interesting discussion that's going on right now about the aspect of grit. In this past NFL season, there's been a lot of coaches that have been talking about the power of grit and what grit can do. I think of the Detroit Lions, which at the time of this recording, I think they're in the playoffs. I forget. But they talked a lot about grit and how grit is something that they're really striving for. And I think along with grit, there is also this discussion of drive. What drives you? What pushes you? What motivates you? And so to kind of start things out, I want to really kind of get into this idea of what it means to have drive. There is a book actually called Drive by, I think it's Daniel Pnk, I believe. And in that book, they talk about this idea of the three components that really create motivation. And so one of those elements is autonomy. And I think it's really interesting when we look at autonomy. In the jobs that I do, in my own personal career and journey, some of the people who excelled the highest also had the most demand for autonomy. Now, when we're looking at autonomy, this is really the desire to direct our own lives, especially in the workspace. If you have somebody who you report to, it's that feeling you get when there is this freedom to get projects done or to get tasks done in your style of doing things at your pace and at your time, and the ability really to work with who you want to, which on the opposite end, as a manager or as a leader, that's giving the people who you supervise that ability to do that. And what I think is interesting about autonomy and its correlation with people who excel, it's really that freedom to execute according to your own style. I have people that I work with, and in some of my past jobs, I think of folk who really had a high sense of autonomy, and they were able to often over deliver, right? Because if you remember in one of our past podcast episodes, I interviewed one of my brothers. His name's Jared Cooper, and he talked about his desire that when he's building people up, he kind of takes them through this 4-part phrase, this 4-part step of showing somebody how to do it, having them do it with him, some type of task or whatever, and then having them do it by themselves, and then the last part of making sure that now they take it and make it their own. And I think there is that ability for autonomy that when we have our sense of freedom to do things kind of how we see fit, and of course there's always going to be some level of boundary, right? That when we have that, there's this opportunity to really kind of show our stuff. We excel. And that's one part that really seems to bring out our motivation and our drive. Another part that helps really bring out motivation and drive is mastery. So I want you to consider this. If you're one who likes autonomy and you want to do things your own way, there's a great chance that maybe you figured out some type of system or some type of way that really works for you. There's also an even greater chance that maybe you've really mastered your way of doing it yourself. So when we're thinking of motivation and how we can find motivation in what we do and how we can really bring a sense of that drive in our careers and in our work, I think there needs to be a discussion about mastery. So my question would be to you, if you're working a 9 to 5, let's say you're a college student, if you're a stay-at-home parent, whatever you're doing, whatever falls under that career definition for you, do you have autonomy to do what you want to do, how you want to do it? And if you do, have you mastered it? Have you given yourself to mastering that particular task? where can't nobody do it the way you do it. Something to think about. Now, on the other end, because again, we have some leaders and managers and directors and executives who listen to this, the question I would pose to you is, are you giving space and opportunity not for just people to get things done, but are you giving them time to master it? Something to think about, right? The ability to master something, when we've mastered something, that alone can oftentimes change the trajectory of what our career looks like. Mastering something can change your financial situation. Mastering something can change your career situation. Mastering something can change what your relationships look like. When we lean into this idea of mastery, we pay money, so much money, especially in the sports arena, to see athletes like LeBron James or Steph Curry or my Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Josh Allen for my Buffalo Bill fans out there, whatever. Yeah. Or Patrick Mahomes, right? People who are at the top of their game, who have mastered a skill set, draws in a ton of crowds. Right? We go to the movies and we have our favorite actors, and those who win Oscars usually are those who have mastered, they haven't just received autonomy to really make a character their own, but they've mastered that portrayal of that character. Consider this. Y'all remember the Batman movies, especially the Christian Bale ones, right? Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises. All those movies are really fantastic, but for the most part, everybody's favorite is The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker. The same portrayal and the same performance that ended up getting him a ton of awards, but also, right, that led to the tragic loss of that actor. But we've seen other portrayals of the Joker, but it wasn't until Joaquin Phoenix came in and did his rendition of the Joker and won an award for that people were really impressed. And there was this sense of mastery, right? So there had to be this combination of autonomy, right? So Heath Ledger took the Joker portrayal and made it his own, and amazing performance, one of the greatest performances of all time. And then Joaquin Phoenix comes and he gets autonomy to kind of do it his way with the vision of the director, and he masters this presentation of the Joker as someone who's little off, right? Has some mental things that he's dealing with, and how that shows up and how he presents that and how he responds to the world with those things. And it was a very, very like gritty, dark kind of like performance that won him an award. But what we see there are two types of autonomy given to make it their own and mastery in what they did. And because of that, there was a response. I want to challenge you that if you're willing and if you find or if you get the ability to have autonomy in whatever you're pursuing, whatever your task, your career, your job, school, whatever you do career-wise, if you find spaces where you have autonomy, you get opportunities to master as well. Autonomy leads to mastery. Remember that. And the last part that really helps encapsulate and creates motivation and drive is this sense of purpose. You see, for me, when I was working in the higher ed field, the work I was doing, I really excelled at, not because I was the most administratively sound. I wasn't. It wasn't because I was the best writer or the best business person. I wasn't. But I had a sense of purpose in what I was doing. I remember when I first started as a dorm director, and I remember being very upfront. I'm surprised I actually got the job, honestly. But I remember sharing how I really felt that, one, I can be good at this, at being a dorm director. I was already working with students. I was already working on building community and doing different things. And I also talked about how I really feel like this is something God's called me to. And I remember the person who interviewed me were like, okay. But what I said was reflected in how I went about the job. I was very passionate and very particular about how I built relationships, how I built teams, how I created communities and environments where people felt seen and felt like they were valued, because they were. right? Because I felt like I knew in my heart I had a sense of purpose. I call it calling, right? This is something I felt that I knew, this was something that I knew I was called to do. And so for me, it was really a matter of walking and calling, right? And when you're called to do something, right? If we want to switch out purpose for calling, I'm gonna get a little churchy on y'all. I wish I had an organ right now. When we switch out purpose for calling, here's something that's really fantastic about this. When we look at a place of calling, there is this idea and this reality that I must have been called by somebody. And so now I am doing right by that person who's called me. And so for me, that calling, I know in my heart was God. I felt that it was God that was calling me to serve in this capacity, to build up these young minds, to be that big brother or uncle or whatever I was to them, and be there for them, to help them walk through this journey of life. If they didn't do well on an exam, they had somebody to talk to and the game plan so that they can come back stronger. When they lost a family member, they had someone who they can talk to. When they were going through a mental health crisis, I was able to be there and bring in the team and the mental health professionals and really respond and try to be there for them the best that I can. To speak life into them, to build them up, to get them ready to be productive members of a society, to find their communities and bring about change, right? So that wasn't just doing a job. That was me walking in what I believe is my calling. Building people up. That's why I do this podcast now. It's because it's a matter of building people up and seeing the best in people and seeing that people have an intrinsic worth and have intrinsic value that needs to be realized, expressed, and seen by the world. So when we're looking at motivation, I can say those are the three things that checked out for me. I had autonomy to run my residence halls, right? Because we don't really call them dorms in college because that's like a no-no. Like that's like saying bomb in an airport. You just don't do that. So I had autonomy in how I ran my residence hall. Okay. I mastered certain aspects of that, whether it was eventing, whether it was putting together programs, whether it was getting people and persuading and motivating people to be their best selves. And I walked in a sense of purpose, or as I would call it, a calling, where I realized that, and the other reason why I like to call this a calling is because I'm a firm believer in that the calling I have is a calling that was called for me, right? It's like having a phone. If I have a phone and somebody calls me, I shouldn't expect you to go grab your phone and pick it up because they didn't call you, they called me. And so this was something that was set aside for me to specifically do in the way that I do it with my personality, with my skill sets and my convictions. And so when we're using this motivation and how the book describes it, I think we get this really cool picture of what it takes to bring out the best in us in our career. Now you might say, Desmond, that's fine and all, but I don't want to be passionate about what I'm doing right now. Desmond, I'm just flipping burgers and I really ain't trying to do that. Let me tell you this. If you want to get out of flipping burgers and doing something that you feel like is more in line with your calling, do your best to walk out those first two parts of motivation and watch how short your stay is there. I'm telling you. Let me say that again. Really dedicate yourself to finding places where you can have autonomy in what you do. And in the places that you have autonomy, master it. And whether it's your purpose or not, I guarantee you it'll be the stepping stone to get you to where you want to go purpose-wise, to get you to where you want to go career-wise, right? And the reason why I think it's important to keep in mind there has to be a level of autonomy is because that's your opportunity to flex your muscle and show how you do what you do. Think about Steph Curry. The game of basketball and how it was played prior to Steph Curry or before Steph Curry is way different to how the game of basketball is now with Steph Curry and eventually after Steph Curry retires. People weren't chucking up threes from the logo. People weren't doing all the things that Steph Curry was doing. And if they did, they would get looked at crazy. The closest we kind of had to that at one point was like Gilbert Arenas in Washington, right, where he was chucking from the logo and looking away and all of that stuff. But that was Gilbert Arenas. He was only able to do that. Now, because he had autonomy, Steph Curry had autonomy to do what he was doing, and he mastered it, it gave opportunity and recognition for all of his accomplishments and all the things that he was going to do. So much so that it's now changed the game of how basketball is played. And again, I'm going to just stick with this whole working in fast food thing, right? Because I remember working in fast food. I worked at a privately owned McDonald's, right? A privately owned McDonald's is no different from a regularly owned McDonald's. It's just they have their own policies and procedures on when you can take vacation and or call off or whatever, and it was all right. But I'll say this. Using that same example, if you can go ahead and just dedicate yourself to mastering where you have autonomy, it'll catch eyes and it will get you to that next place that you want to go. I promise you. Do your best with the things that you don't have autonomy over, but really master the things that you have autonomy over, because that shows you know what you're talking about. That shows that you have insight. That shows that you have a skill set. That shows that you have a way of doing things and you have a way of getting results that other people have not considered yet. Just something to think about. Another thing this book talked about that I thought was really interesting was their definition of the word flow. You ever just been in a flow where you're crushing it, whether it's you're working on a task or a project, you're just kind of in the zone, right? Well, Pnk gives this definition of flow, and they kind of describe it more like this. They describe it as a state of deep focus and immersion in a particular activity. Now, they preface this with also having to acknowledge that flow comes. Now, they also talk about flow being achieved when a task is not too incredibly difficult, but also not too incredibly easy. And when it's also aligned with whatever our motivators are, right? So having an understanding of the motivation and tapping into that gives us the opportunity to really be in a flow. And what I think is interesting is I think sometimes we get flow confused with mindless activity. Okay. So if it's too easy and you don't got to think too much about it, you might think, oh, I'm in the flow, I'm getting stuff done. And it's not necessarily that you're in a flow. You're just doing a mindless activity. You're doing busy work maybe, right? There are some times where with part of what I do as a coach and as a speaker that I got to go through contracts and sign a lot of stuff, right? Because I don't have an admin to do that, and that's okay. And so that's more mindless activity. Once I check everything, I read everything, and since a lot of it are my own contracts that I put together, I just need to see that people agree, and there isn't any additional writing on it, and then I'm just signing stuff off. Doing that for like an hour can get pretty mindless. You're just reviewing, cool, boom, boom. There's not a lot of work that goes into it. That's not a flow. Being in a flow is when you're working on something that's requiring something of you, that's requiring you to think a little bit, but you're also seeing progress in your efforts. So my question for you is, when was the last time you were in a flow, right? When was the last time you really found yourself kind of just flowing? I think for me, I find myself flowing whenever I'm putting together my curriculums or my materials, either for a podcast or for a workshop or a speech, and I'm doing research and I'm figuring out problems and stuff. And it's not necessarily too difficult, but it's not easy either. It's just not mindless. I have to put in a little effort, and it's in that effort that I can kind of get engrossed into something and time can sort of fly by. And I find myself producing things that I'm really proud of that gets results and gets recognition and all of that. And I would say that is my flow when I'm doing stuff like that. What about you? When was the last time you found yourself in a flow? Have you been in a flow before? And if not, why not? What pieces of the puzzle are missing keeping you from experiencing a flow? Do you hate what you're doing? Do you hate where you're at career-wise? Because maybe you've never experienced a flow. I don't know. Something to think about. If you're someone who manages people, if you're either a supervisor, a leader, an executive director, whatever, are you creating environments where people can tap into flow? Do they have the autonomy? Are they mastering the things that they have autonomy over? Does it align with purpose and calling? Are you being strategic on where you place people? Are they able to tap into flow? Something to think about. When I was working in higher education, some some of the students and some of the staff members that I was most proud of were the ones who I was able to get them in a space where they could just shine in what they were doing. It wasn't that they were given easy stuff and they were just knocking out easy stuff, but it was that combination of giving them the autonomy to do something on their own. They were able to master that. It was something that they felt a sense of purpose or calling, right? It was something that they were able to take pride in. And through that, I got to see them in their element. I got to see them in their flow, whether it was designing or editing something for our social media and our websites, whether it was going through the process of putting together programs and event ideas, whether it was having engaging conversations with students who might have had questions regarding race or politics or community dynamics, whatever. They were in that space. They were in their flow. Because all those things were aligned. Have you achieved that as a leader? So real quick, in the comments below, tell me about a time you feel like you've tapped into some flow. When have you flowed in something? And what was the results? Was it at work? Do you feel, I feel like I believe that you can even tap into flow in your relationships. Have you ever been in a flow in your marriage? Where you and your partner is just, you're seeing challenges, you're taking on challenges together, you're working together, you're being intentional, you're working on your marriage, you're growing in your friendship, and it seems like you're just in the flow. Has that ever been something you experienced before? Taking it back to sports, I think of times where teams won games, and when they're being interviewed in the post-game interview, they'll ask them like, hey, what was the secret? And one of the things they'll say is, we had a real good week of practice. If I was to translate that, I would say they probably tapped into a flow. And I think it can show up in so many other things. So I ask these questions because the goal is that hopefully you start to get a little bit more reflective and introspective in what you do. Because when you can kind of tap into that introspection, you'll get a better understanding of what you want to pursue and maybe even a better idea of who you are. I want you to think of what are your core motivations. I want you to think about what are your core motivations in terms of career growth. Whatever you do career-wise, what are those core motivations behind it? Are they truly core motivations? Is there that autonomy? Is there that mastery? Is there that sense of purpose or calling or pride? Matter of fact, in the comments below, I want you to pause what you're doing and I want you to go ahead and drop. Or if you're listening on Spotify, it'll be a question on there that you can interact with. I want you to tell me, what are your core motivations? For whatever you're pursuing, you don't even got to tell us what you're pursuing. I want you to tell us the core motivations behind it, because I would love to see if maybe we can guess whatever you're doing, right, in the next episode. So in the comment section below, write down 3 core motivations behind what you're doing. And then we'll see if we can guess it and kind of figure out whatever it is that you're doing. That'll be a fun game. I think the second part in understanding our core motivators is it'll give us the opportunity to then find purpose and find those nuggets in whatever we're doing and apply it to the end goal. So even if you might be working in fast food and you have ambitions of wanting to go to college or starting your own business or your own clothing brand or whatever, if you can take the time to establish those core motivations, I promise you'll be able to go into the work that you're doing and you'll be able to pull skills and tools and nuggets that will be so important to your future success, right? So for me, like I said, playing football, there are some things I learned from playing a team sport that became paramount to what I do in my professional life. Growing up in the church as a preacher's kid and going to church and having pastors and having pastors as parents, and then even going to a new church once I went to college and having to have someone who's my leader, someone who I was responsible for answering to. That taught me this idea of authority and how authority works and those who you're responsible for, those who are over you and those who are under you. It carries over into what I do. It carries over into my career. It carries over into my business. I gleaned those nuggets. When I was working at Eaton Park, which again is just an upscale Denny, shout out to Eaton Park, it's the place for smiles. Being a host, learning how to sharpen my people skills and keep people engaged and do troubleshooting and to deal with issues as they arise. All those things led to what I'm doing now. So I want you to maybe reframe how you're looking at your current work and see, are there places where you can kind of maybe perfect this skill? Comedians do a great job of this, right? They before they go on the stage and they do their top material for their special or their Netflix special or whatever, they'll look and try to find small little hole in the wall clubs where they can practice their material. Where are you practicing? Where are you getting your reps? Before you start the business, where do you get your reps in customer satisfaction? Before you launch the nonprofit, where are you getting your reps in dealing with troubleshooting and dealing with policies and procedures and dealing with product fulfillment and dealing with design and team meetings? Where are you getting your reps? Where is your comedy club that you can practice these things? So when it's your time to step up and it's your time to launch out into whatever you feel your purpose and calling is, you'll be ready. What does that community look like for you? Do you have a community? Are you just giving yourself fully to trying to figure this out and you don't have a really good work-life harmony? All of these are questions that we really have to consider. And these have been the things that I've constantly worked to consider and try to perfect in my own life, which is why, again, we started the coaching program. And it's why we work on those core 8 life categories. And we don't depart from those. Those are our foundation that we use here in this business because it helps us see and it helps us understand where a person might be lacking. So, closing thought, I want us to view our career this week. And I want us to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. I want us to consider, are we tapping into our motivations? Are we tapping into that drive? Do we have the autonomy? Do we have the mastery? Are we looking at it and do we have a sense of purpose in what we do, or a sense of calling, or at the very least, a sense of pride in what we do? So that we can tap into flow and see what our potential really, and to see our potential realized when we're executing at a high level. So, hey, thank you so much for hanging out. Please drop your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from y'all what kind of things you're going to be doing to really perfect this sense of career. And also, again, if you're ever interested in coaching or being a part of any other stuff that we have going on, you'll see stuff in the descriptions below, links that you can go to and sign up for coaching or be a part of any of our master classes or courses. But thank you so much for your time. It's always good to have you home. Now get on out of here and go impact the world. Peace.